everyone, welcome back, or welcome if you're new to my channel. My name is Erica and I live in the Pacific Northwest with my wife and our pup Effie. And today we are doing a Q&A, a sip and knit, a knit and chat, whatever we want to call it. I am going to be knitting on a sweater and then answering some questions that were asked on, I think mostly Instagram. Yeah, I had put a question box on my story a few weeks ago and now I'm going to answer them. So if that sounds good to you, get something to drink or get something to knit on and let's get into it. Okay, so I organized the questions. I got like similar ones, so I tried to put them all together. So like why I started knitting, and then some yarn related questions, knitting project related questions, and then at the end we'll go over like personal lifestyle-y questions. So if you're just here for the knitting content, it's all at the beginning, which is good. First I'm wearing a sweater that I knit. This is the Beyond Basic sweatshirt by Wool and Beyond, and the yarn is Majo Garn Tweed Supreme in the color Avocado. So that is what I'm wearing, and then what I am knitting on is the Farnham sweater by the Knit Pearl Girl, and it's a really pretty striped sweater. I'm almost done. I just need to do the ribbing on the body and then the ribbing on the sleeves. I wasn't sure if I wanted to do the ribbing in the darker color or in the contrast color, so I did not do the ribbing on the sleeves yet because I wanted to wait till I was further along in the project. And now I've decided going to go with the darker color, so I need to go back and finish the sleeves after. But that is what I'm working on. Let me know what you're working on in the comments and let's get into it. So I have my phone here with the questions. So the first three are all very similar, so I'll just kind of answer it at once. How I started knitting, how long I have knit, and what my first project was, and what was my inspiration to start knitting. So I feel like all of those are very similar. The first time I ever learned to knit was back in elementary school. I was in 6th grade and my school offered like extra curricular hobby classes one year after school, and my friend and I both wanted to do one, and she signed up for knitting, but at the time I was very much into baking and I thought I wanted to be a pastry chef and had a baking one, so I did baking. She did knitting. She had so much fun at knitting that I wanted to learn, so then she ended up teaching me. And I don't even know if I ever finished that project. I think it was like a scarf or something. I don't think I ever even finished it, but that was the first time I ever knit. Then I never finished that scarf. I don't even know if I knit for like 6 months. It was very short-lived. And then I relearned to knit and started knitting in 2022 at the beginning of the year. And that is where all of this happened from. So it was early 2022 in January, and I was watching someone on YouTube. What is her name? Sarah. I can't remember her last name, but I was watching her YouTube, and she's like a lifestyle vlogger, not knitting related, but she was crocheting in her video, and I was like, I remember I used to like knitting. I think I'm gonna start knitting again. So I went to Joann's and I got very cheap knitting needles and then started Googling what I could make. So the first thing I made, and it was not successful at all, was like a knitted like headband that just went here and covered your ears. And I followed Jenna Phipps on YouTube. She had a little tutorial to simply make it. Made that, it didn't turn out, I ended up getting rid of it. So I feel like my first successful project was a beanie, and for that I did more research. I found a YouTube video that had step-by-step on how to do it, which I'll link it below if it's still around, and at that time, I had started following some knitting influencers, the main one being Kara's Knitting on Instagram, and she used so much Wool and Beyond. No, not Wool and Beyond. Wool and the Gang yarn, the like super chunky kind of roving yarn in a way, and I was like, oh my gosh, that's exactly what I want to do. So I made a beanie with that in purple. I don't know if I still have it. I'll have to look for it if I do. But that was my first successful knitting project. And I think the beanie took it like knitting to the next level, because knitting flat to me as a beginner, like making a scarf or whatever, is not that fun. I think knitting in the round is a lot more fun. So making a beanie was a great first project. And on that chunky yarn and chunky needles, it knit up pretty quickly, so I didn't lose motivation. And then since then, I have not been able to stop. I'm sure many of you can relate. And that, yeah, that's how I started knitting. Later into knitting, oh, I dropped a stitch. There we go. I don't really have any friends. Now I do, but when I first started knitting, I didn't really have any friends that knit. And so that's also how I got into watching knitting podcasts and then wanting to post some of my own, because I just wanted to talk about knitting and listen to people talk about knitting as much as possible, because I didn't have anyone like in my personal life that knit. Now I have some knitting friends, but at the beginning it was like anything I could find where someone was talking about knitting, I just wanted to watch it, and then that led me to wanting to make this YouTube channel. So now we'll get into the yarn related questions. Any yarn that I want to try? Yes, there are so many yarns that I want to try. I really want to try Hillesvåg unspun yarn. I want to try Rauma yarn. Clearly I'm being influenced by Inga from Knitting Traditions. I want to try hand spun yarn that I spin myself. So I need to do that to be able to try it. I want to try Isair yarn. I've used their sock yarn. Absolutely love it. I would like to try their Highland wool or their alpaca too. What else do I want to try? So many that sometimes I think, oh my gosh, am I going to be able to try all of it in my lifetime? I think I will, but there's so many that I want to try. What is my favorite yarn? Oh gosh. I don't know if I have a favorite yarn that I've made garments with other than socks. I think the Isair sock yarn is my very favorite sock yarn, as well as the Hedgehog Fibers twist, the one that has BFL in it. Those are my favorite sock yarns. I don't know yet that I have a favorite yarn that I've made sweaters and things with, but I hope to find it, because I love that Inga's favorite yarn is the Rauma Feville, I want to say it is. Hers is like the fingering weight one. I might be mixing it up with the worsted weight. I'll put the name on the screen. But that is her favorite yarn, and I just love that she knows that's her favorite, and it's like tried and true and will always work, so I want to get there one day. What is the most precious yarn in my stash? I have a couple. One is what I'm making this with. I had wanted to try. It's the Hillesvåg Ask yarn. Again, influenced by the lovely Inga. I have been wanting to try this Norwegian wool for so long. This got ripped right in the middle, but I've been wanting to try this for so long. I finally got myself to buy it last year, and then it took me a whole nother year to actually knit with it, because it just felt like so much pressure to pick the perfect project. And originally I was going to make the Crystolin cardigan, but I just felt like I would get more wear out of simple stripes. So I finally was able to decide something to make with it. I'm loving it so far. I can't wait for it to wash up, because when I made my swatch, it bloomed so beautifully, and it's so light. Like, I can't believe how lightweight this feels, and it's going to be so warm. So loving, loving, loving this. And another dream yarn that I have, and I also feel like is my precious child that I cannot decide what to make with it, is this Noro yarn, and it's the Noro Viola yarn, and it is the color 3. It is so pretty. There's so many colors in it, which is very different to what I normally knit with. But I saw What's Millie Making on Instagram. She knit, I think, an Ozetta pattern with this, and I was obsessed with it so much that I basically ordered this yarn because of her project. I'm still trying to decide what to make with it. I might make a cardigan from My Favorite Things Knitwear, or I might make the Traveler cardigan. I think that's what it's called, from Ozetta. But again, I bought this almost a year ago because I bought it for myself for my birthday last year, and I still have not even taken the ball band off to swatch. I just can't get myself to use it for whatever reason. My thoughts on acrylic versus untreated fibers and my favorite yarn suppliers. My thoughts on acrylic versus untreated: do whatever makes you happy. I don't have like controversial opinions on it. Sometimes I have acrylic in my yarn, sometimes I don't. I generally prefer it without, but I also like to get a deal on yarn sometimes. I'm not trying to spend so much money all the time, and that tends to be a little bit more affordable. And some people like the way that feels on their skin more than natural fibers, so I just feel like whatever works best for you and your budget and whatnot. I don't have strong feelings on what anyone should or should not do when it comes to yarn. And my favorite yarn suppliers: woolandcompany.com. They're the best. They have so many brands. They now also have Knitting for Olive on there, and they do not charge shipping, which, for whatever reason, when shipping's free, it feels like everything's cheaper. I know that's not true, but... And they also cake up the yarn for free. I have seen some yarn suppliers, yarn sellers, that will charge to cake up your yarn, which I understand because it does take time. But I have a ball winder at home, so I could do it. But if they're doing it for free, girl, you know I'm gonna want someone else to do it for me. Especially a sweater's quantity. I don't want to wind up all that yarn myself if I don't have to. And they have random brands on there that they give 10% off on the everyday favorite brands, which I'm not sure what all of them are, but I know Cascade is one of them, and if you spend $100 you get 10% off. So if you're buying sweaters quantities of yarn, definitely check out their everyday favorites because you can save 10%, which is pretty great. Okay. A yarn color that you love that you wish you made more projects with, and my most bought yarn color. A yarn color or color that I love that I wish I made more projects with is green. I know I'm wearing green right now, but this is the only green sweater I have, and green is my favorite color. But for some reason I never knit green garments. My most bought yarn color is probably white, cream, off-white. Nothing exciting. I can picture like my stash in my head right now, and I have Cascade 220 in the natural color. I have Sendness Garn Double Sunday in off-white. I have some Cascade cotton yarn to make a summer top in white. I have Lion Brand Fisherman's Wool in off-white. Lots of creams, whites, beiges are usually what I'm going for. Even this is brown, but then the contrast color is like a beige color, so that's usually where I'm at. I do want to try and knit with more color this year. And in general, I want to knit more green because green has always been my favorite color, and I don't think that's going to change anytime soon. So I should probably knit with more green. Okay, now we're going to get into the knitting project, knitting related questions. Who is my favorite pattern designer? If you've been around my channel for a while, you can already probably answer that. Wool and Beyond, 10 out of 10, is my favorite. I've made a lot of her patterns, and they're the only ones so far that I've wanted to make a second time. That is how I know she's my favorite, because not only did I buy it the first time, but instead of making a new pattern, I want to remake some of hers. I've made this by Wool and Beyond. I've made her dream cardigan. Oh, I'm blanking. My dream cardigan. I've purchased yarn and the pattern for the shell tee. I started her nomad slippers. I'm almost done with those. Oh, her split personality mittens. I've made those. Let's see what else. Braided beanie. I have yarn and have swatched for the ribbed sleeves. Oh, the thin sweater. I made the thin sweater. Her ultimate beginner's beanie. I've made that. Beyond basic sweatshirt. And I just recently swatched for her reversed sweater, which just came out, and I think I'm going to knit that in Lion brand fisherman's wool in brown. What stitch pattern can you not stand? At the moment, I'm over brioche because I made my November jacket, and then I also made the braided beanie, which is brioche. So I'm sure I will make something with brioche again in the future because it's so beautiful and so squishy, but at the moment, I'm good. I'm good on that. What design elements make me most excited? Oh, design elements that make me excited are like small intricate things that just elevate a project. So this would be an example in the Beyond basic sweatshirt. This little cross right here at the top, that makes me very happy. And then it flows through, oh, where is it? The cross detail goes on the sleeves, and then it also goes on, it's down the side too, on the body. So small details like that in designs make me very happy. Also, this sweatshirt has a double knit band across the back, so it's kind of like a dress shirt. Things like that excite me and make me want to knit them when they have like little teeny details that other people may not notice, but to me, I feel like that makes it more special. Okay, most difficult project. I would say my most difficult project, like, ever, was probably the first sweater I ever made. Now I could knit that sweater very easily, but because it was the first one, I wanted to give up so many times. I made like a top-down raglan from Kara's Knitting. Oh, I'm wrapped up in my yarn. And the Wool and the Gang, that super bulky weight yarn. And it took me so long. I got so frustrated. I had to keep watching videos because it was just not clicking, but that was definitely one of the hardest things I've ever made. I know now it would be much easier, and so just have to remember that going forward if I try a new skill or try something that's really hard. That top-down raglans used to be really hard, and now I could do that. So that was definitely the hardest. What's your favorite project you've knit? My favorite project that I ever knit is my dream cardigan from Wool and Beyond. It is knit up in Knitting for Olive, mohair, and merino. And before I made it into the dream cardigan, it was a Knitting for Olive raglan sweater. I think it's called It's Not a Sweatshirt. And I made that, and I wasn't getting much wear out of it, and so I decided to unravel the whole thing, wash the yarn, hang it up to dry, and then recake it and knit that new project. And then on top of doing all of that, that was my first time unraveling one of my projects fully and making it into something new. That was also my first time steeking a sweater, and I was very proud of myself. So I think that is my favorite project, probably because I'm the most proud of that one. Dream knit. Oh, dream knit, and then a knit that intimidates you. These kind of go hand in hand. Anything by Marie Wallin. I especially love the chestnut cardigan. Oh my goodness, it's so beautiful. And I would love to knit something by Marie Wallin one day. I love to make colorwork socks, but for some reason, knitting an entire colorwork sweater sounds so intimidating to me. And then a colorwork cardigan, like having to steek it after doing all that color work also sounds terrifying. So one day I'll do it, because I really do want an all over colorwork sweater or cardigan to wear. I think they're so beautiful. Yeah, and Marie Wallen has such beautiful designs. So something by her. What is your favorite knitting tool and notion? Where is your favorite place to knit? One of my favorite knitting tools are these cords, which I can link down below. I use them a lot to put, let's see, these cords. I have blue in here right now. I use them a lot to put stitches on hold, like this. It makes it easier to try things on. You can put the stitches on here so you can try stuff on. Love these. I used to not use these because I didn't know where people were getting them, and then I found them on Amazon and I got a whole roll of it, and I just cut pieces off as I need it. So I'll link that below. I really like that because before, when I would try to try sweaters on, I either wouldn't try them on because I didn't understand how people were doing that, or I bought a let's see, I bought an interchangeable cord for my needles that was 60 inches, and I would transfer it onto that so then I could try it on and not have to worry about them slipping off. But this is just much better because you can adjust the length, like you just cut a piece of it and then it's a hollow tube and you shove your needle in there and then slide the stitches. And like for this one, for the sleeve, I like that I was just able to tie the two ends in a knot and none of them will fall off until I'm ready to put them back on the needles. So that would be my favorite. Another favorite are pretty stitch markers. This one is from Mabel and Jess. Love a pretty stitch marker. Any big knitting plans for 2025? I don't know if I have any big ones. Two things I really want to try this year are making felted slippers and actually spinning my own yarn. I learned how to use a drop spindle in the summer and I haven't touched it since because I always just would rather knit than spin yarn. But I want to fall in love with spinning yarn, and I really want to make my own yarn and knit a pair of socks with it. Like even if they're DK weight chunky socks, because I just think it's so cool and I just really want to be able to do that. Can I recommend a top-down vanilla sock pattern for new sock knitters? Tips. Yes, Summerly Knits has a free one, vanilla sock pattern. I'll link it below. It's free. She has lots of tips. She also posts videos on YouTube explaining techniques. Tips I would give, okay, I have two separate tips. One, skip the pattern I just said and instead do a DK weight sock. The Sunday socks from Petite Knit, that was my first pair, one of my first pairs of socks I knit. Easier to see what you're doing and learn how to do it because you're using DK weight yarn instead of fingering. So that would be my first tip. Then, if you're ready to move on and make top-down vanilla socks, use the Summerly Knits free pattern. I'll link it below. And try out different ways of knitting socks. You can do magic loop, double point needles, or the tiny circulars. The first socks I ever made, I did magic loop, and I did not like it. And so I thought, oh my gosh, I'm never going to be a sock knitter, but I wanted to be one so badly because in general, before even knitting, I just love socks. I would always buy pattern socks every Christmas, every Halloween. My mom used to take me to get a new pair of socks from like Old Navy or Target because she knew how much I love socks. So just deep in my soul, I wanted to be a sock knitter. And I was so bummed when I did not like it using magic loop. But then I found out about the teeny tiny circulars. I think I have some. Teeny tiny circumference circulars. They're like a 9-inch circumference, and it changed the game for me. So now I use these mostly and then do magic loop when needed, like on the toe. And then there's also DPNs. I've never used DPNs except like on the thumb of a mitten, and it was really hard for me. So I wouldn't knit socks with DPNs, but that's my other tip. try out the different methods until you find one that sticks, because once you do, making socks is so fun. And that's one of my favorite things to make now. Now we're gonna get into like the random personal questions. First one is, does my partner knit? No, she does not. She is great at sewing though, great sewist. So she loves sewing, I love knitting. It's great, we can make things for each other. I want to know how you and your wife met. Serena hates that we met like this, but she also is obviously happy we met. But we met because she slid into my DMs on Instagram a long time ago. So we went to the same college and everything, but that's why we started talking and dating. And she still is like, oh, I wish we had a meet cute. I want to say that we met somewhere, like we bumped into each other at a coffee shop. Not that I freaking slid into your DMs on Instagram. And I think it's hilarious. So that is how we met. And then we started talking. And ever since the day we started talking, I don't think we ever stopped talking since. Okay, let's see. Hogwarts house, Ravenclaw. Other hobbies I have. Reading. I love to read. I love to go on walks and hike. I love to bake. I recently got a Nintendo Switch because I'm into the cozy gaming. I also love Mario Kart, Mario Party. All the cozy hobbies are what I'm loving right now, with it being winter. Books I love, and my favorite book of 2024. Books I love. All fantasy. I love, love, love fantasy. My favorite book of 2024 was When the Moon Hatched, which was a fantasy novel. The second one comes out later this year, and I am counting down the days because I really enjoyed the first one. And yeah, I would say basically all I read for the most part is fantasy, and then a few like romance books here and there. But oh, I did start a book today that has to do with knitting. Let me go grab it. So the book I got at my local library that has to do with knitting, kind of. It's called Vanishing Fleece: Adventures in American Wool. So I'm excited to read this. I think basically the gist of it is that she's going through the entire process of taking yarn from a sheep, shearing it, all the way into make it into yarn, which I think will be super interesting. And she went to different businesses and like mills and companies throughout the US that do this stuff, and learned all about it. And yeah, Adventures in American Wool. So we'll let you know how this is, but I basically read fantasy only, some romance, a mystery here or there, but sometimes if they're too realistic I get a little spooked. So I think that's why I like fantasy, because it's like so unrealistic that even if bad stuff happens, I don't get freaked out. Okay, and the last question that I have is, how did you get into thrifting? How would you describe your home interior aesthetic? How I got into thrifting. So the first time I ever got into thrifting was probably in high school, late high school, early college age. So I was probably like 17, 18, 19, because I watched Jen M on YouTube, who back then was going by Clothes Encounters, and she thrifted like 90% of her wardrobe, and I thought her style was so cool and I wanted to be like her, so I would go thrifting for clothing. And then I kind of fell off thrifting in college and once I started working, because I felt like it was harder to find clothes that went with the style that I wanted to wear as like a professional working wardrobe. So then when Serena and I started dating, and then when we were living together, we got super into thrifting home decor because we would watch Lone Fox on YouTube, and he would do thrift flips, DIYs, all of that kind of stuff, and that would make us want to go thrifting all the time for home decor. So we started thrifting a lot for home decor, and now I feel like a lot of, like, our house is half and half. Half new, maybe even more thrifted than new stuff. furniture, like this chair is new, our couches are new, our bed, like our mattress is new, but then this beautiful sideboard slash buffet is from Facebook Marketplace and it's vintage. And interior aesthetic, I don't know. It's such a hard question, but I love like very clean, warm tones and lots of vintage stuff. So love vintage gold frames. I love vintage, like this kind of vintage furniture. I'm not so much into mid-century modern vibes. For me, I think it's pretty for other people, but for the type of home I want, it doesn't, the vibe isn't there for me. Interior designers, I love Leanne Ford. She does like beautiful, creamy, dreamy, all white, warm woods, beautiful work. So I get a lot of inspiration from her. Also on YouTube, her name is Exo McKenna on YouTube. She does like more French interior design. I feel like I'm a cross between vintage French interiors, but also like vintage English cottagey, because I would love to live in the Cotswolds and live in an old English cottage. So that's kind of where I feel like our vibe is. But then we do have some modern stuff, like this vase is very modern, but then it's sitting on a vintage stool. So kind of mix the older and newer together, so it doesn't fully look like I live in a grandma's house while I sit and knit with all my old furniture around me. Oh my gosh, I can see my future already. But those are all the questions that everybody asked. Another random thing that nobody asked, but I just want to talk about it, was my favorite movie of last year. It was Wicked, and I've watched it like 8 times now, and I can't get enough of it. So let me know if you watched Wicked, because it's just incredible. I'm very excited for part 2 to come out later this year, and then I can be obsessed all over again, and then I can spend an entire day knitting and watching part 1 and part 2 all together when it's streaming. I also really want to make green and pink striped socks or some sort of color work, because I just love green and pink because of Wicked. So I might see what yarn I have in my stash to make some green and pink socks. Okay, that's all I have today. Thank you for submitting questions. Let me know what you were working on while you were watching this. Also, let me know if you have any other questions down below, because I can start saving them for a future Q&A. And, oh, one last thing. I'm hosting a knit along with my friends, Mariel from What Mariel Made and Sophia from Super Bloom Knits. So we are hosting a cozy textures knit along through March 31st. I will put more information down below, but basically post a photo of what you're making. Just needs to be something textured, so something not plain stockinette. Could be brioche, cables, ribbing. I could show you a good example. A good example would be my beanie from Wool & Beyond. So it has a cable and brioche at the top. So you don't need to finish your project by March 31st. Just need to post a photo on Instagram and tag the 3 of us, and also follow all 3 of us, and make something with cozy texture. So maybe you'll make a cable sweater that you've been wanting to make. Maybe you'll make a beanie like this. I also think like a cute scarf with some sort of texture, like the waffle loop scarf would be really cute. I made a full bundle on Ravelry, which I'll link below, that shows a bunch of patterns that might be good for the knit along, and a lot of them are free. I tried to find some free patterns, so I think like half of them you have to pay for and the other half are free. So definitely check that out. It includes some textured socks and little like bandana scarves. I don't know if I put a sweater in there. I think I focus more on accessories. Oh, like hot water bottle covers. Those are in there, so definitely check that out, because there are quite a few free patterns. It'll be super fun. We're going to do 3 separate prizes. We'll each send one to someone. I have given you a hint in this video about one of the prizes that I will be giving. So stay tuned for that and definitely join. It'll be super fun. Don't need to finish your project. There's no rush. Just get a photo up there and follow us and tag all 3 of us and use the hashtag Cozy Textures KAL, and we will pick a winner at the end of March. So that's all I have now. I hope you're having a great day and a great week, and I'll talk to you next time.